Rain mixed with blood on the stone steps of Le Chateau, as Dora Buckner's bound wrists scraped against the marble. The night smelled like expensive cigars and fresh wounds. A moment ago, she'd been chasing a story. Now she was bleeding into the hands of Chicago's most dangerous man. "Who did this to you?" Willie Johnson demanded, his voice low and lethal. His burgundy suit jacket hung open, gold cufflinks catching the amber light from the club's entrance, and his hands, steady when signing death warrants, trembled as he cut the rope from her wrists. Willie Johnson had ruled the South Side outfit for 12 years, and he had seen violence in every form the city could offer. But finding a woman tied and beaten on his doorstep, her brown eyes glassy with pain, her camera bag torn and empty beside her, something ancient and possessive roared to life in his chest. Whoever had left her here wasn't just sending a message. They were declaring war. And they'd just made the last mistake of their lives. Before we begin, hit the subscribe button, like this video now, and comment where you're from. Trust me, you don't want to miss how a journalist and a gangster will burn Chicago's corruption to the ground, and only one of them might survive. Now, let's get into the story. Dora Buckner had been freelancing in Chicago for 2 years, and she'd learned which stories were worth the risk. At 29, she knew which officials would talk off the record, which neighborhoods had the best coffee shops for covert meetings, which alleys had cameras, and which didn't. Friday nights were research nights, and tonight she'd needed every ounce of courage she had. The money from this exposé, if she could prove the connection between Councilman Hodges' campaign and organized crime, would finally pay off her student loans and fund the documentary she'd been planning for years. She wore dark jeans, a black leather jacket against the October wind, and boots that could run if things went wrong. Her press badge was tucked in her camera bag, and her backup recorder was hidden in her jacket lining as she parked 2 blocks from Le Chateau. The tip was solid. Money laundering, police payoffs, campaign funds flowing through Willie Johnson's private club. Get photos of the transaction. Get out. Simple. She'd been maybe 20 feet from the club's side entrance, camera ready, when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast. Deliberate. Multiple sets. She turned to run. They were faster. A hood yanked over her head. Rough hands grabbed her arms. Something hard connected with her ribs, and the world tilted sideways. She fought, scratched, kicked, screamed, but a voice hissed in her ear, "You're in the wrong neighborhood, sweetheart." When she woke, her wrists were bound, her mouth tasted of blood, and her camera was gone. The last thing she remembered before the darkness took her again was being dragged toward bright lights, and a man's voice cutting through the rain. "What the hell is this?" Then strong arms lifted her, and for reasons she couldn't explain through the pain, she stopped fighting. Dora's eyes cracked open to unfamiliar ceiling molding, ornate, expensive, the kind that belonged in historic buildings downtown. Not a hospital. Definitely not her apartment. Her body inventoried the damage before her mind caught up. Throbbing skull, burning wrists, ribs that screamed with every breath. She tried to sit up and gasped, pain lancing through her side. "Easy," a woman's voice, firm but not unkind. "You've got 3 cracked ribs and a concussion. Moving isn't your friend right now." Dora turned her head, slowly, and found an older black woman in scrubs checking an IV bag attached to her arm. Not a hospital. A bedroom, silk sheets, mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago River. "Where?" "Le Chateau. Private quarters upstairs." The woman adjusted the IV drip with practiced efficiency. "I'm Dr. Russo. You're lucky Mr. Johnson found you when he did. Another hour in that rain and we'd be having a different conversation." Mr. Johnson. Willie Johnson. The mafia boss whose empire she'd been documenting for 3 months. The man who'd been kneeling beside her when everything went black. Memory flooded back in sharp, brutal fragments. 12 hours earlier, the coffee shop on West Madison had been buzzing with the usual Friday afternoon crowd when Dora's source slid into the booth across from her. "You sure about this?" Marcus, not that Marcus, her grad school friend Marcus Chen, pushed a manila folder across the table. "Because once you open this, you can't unsee it." Dora had opened it anyway. Bank statements, wire transfers, a web of shell companies all leading back to one location, Le Chateau, Willie Johnson's private club in the Loop. And right in the middle of it all, Councilman Richard Hodges' campaign manager, Vincent Calder, moving money like he owned the city. "Calder's picking up a payment tonight," Marcus had said. 9 p.m., side entrance. "If you can photograph the exchange, I can prove the connection." Dora's pulse had quickened. This was it, the story that would make editors finally take her seriously. "You're certain about the timing?" "My source inside Hodges' office confirmed it an hour ago." Marcus had hesitated, then added, "Dora, these aren't people who forgive curiosity. Johnson's outfit doesn't leave witnesses." She'd smiled, tucking the folder into her camera bag. "Then I'll make sure they don't see me." The plan had been solid. Position herself across from Le Chateau's service entrance. Long lens, low profile. Photograph Calder entering. Photograph whatever exchange happened through the club's windows if she could get the angle. Get the shot. Get out. Get the story published before anyone knew she'd been there. She'd been in position by 8:45, dressed in black, camera ready, rain starting to mist the October air. At 8:52, footsteps echoed behind her in the alley. Too late, she'd realized her mistake. She'd been so focused on the club's entrance, she hadn't watched her own back. The hood had come down fast, rough fabric choking off her scream. Hands grabbed her arms, wrenching them behind her back. She'd kicked, connected with something solid, heard a grunt. Then pain exploded across her temple and the world tilted. "Fucking journalists," a voice had snarled. Male, Midwestern accent. "Always sticking your nose where it don't belong." Another voice. Colder. Calder said to send a message. They'd dragged her deeper into the alley. She'd fought, scratched, twisted, tried to break free, but there were 3 of them, and her vision kept swimming from the blow to her head. The beating had been methodical, professional, not meant to kill, but to terrify. "Stay out of Chicago politics, sweetheart," the cold voice had whispered as they'd bound her wrists with rope. "Next time, we won't be so gentle." They'd taken her camera, her press badge, her phone. Then they'd dumped her on stone steps and disappeared into the rain. The last thing she'd heard before unconsciousness claimed her was a door opening and a voice. Deep, commanding, dangerous. "What the hell?" Dr. Russo was checking Dora's pupils with a pen light when the bedroom door opened. 2 men entered. The first she didn't recognize. Tall, dark-skinned, early 40s, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd seen violence and wasn't impressed by it anymore. The second was Willie Johnson, still in his burgundy suit, tie loosened, looking like he hadn't slept. "She's awake?" Willie's eyes found hers immediately, something unreadable flickering in their depths. "And lucid," Dr. Russo confirmed. "Vitals are stable. She needs rest and monitoring, but she'll recover." "Good," Willie nodded once. "Leave us." Dr. Russo gathered her medical bag without argument and slipped out. The other man stayed, arms crossed, studying Dora like she was a puzzle he didn't particularly want to solve. "Marcus Reed," Willie said, gesturing to his companion. "My right hand. Marcus, meet Dora Buckner, photojournalist, currently bleeding on my property for reasons we're about to discuss." Marcus's expression didn't soften. "She was carrying press credentials when we found her. Freelance journalist. And according to what's left of her camera bag, she's been documenting activity around this club for weeks." Dora's stomach dropped. They knew. "So let me ask you plainly, Ms. Buckner," Marcus continued, his voice flat and professional. "What were you doing outside Le Chateau? Who sent you? And what exactly were you trying to expose?" "Marcus!" Willie's voice cut through the interrogation like a blade. "Step back." "Boss, she's a journalist investigating—" "I know what she is." Willie moved closer to the bed, his presence overwhelming even without touching her. "I also know someone beat her half to death and left her on my doorstep. That's not random. That's a message. Which means she's connected to something bigger." He turned to Dora, and for a moment, she saw past the reputation, saw the calculating intelligence that had kept him alive in a business that buried its mistakes. "You were investigating corruption," he said. Not a question. "Councilman Hodges' campaign. Money laundering through my establishment. No point lying." "Yes. And someone decided to stop you permanently." "They said to stay out of Chicago politics." Marcus swore under his breath. Willie's jaw tightened. "That," Willie said softly, dangerously, "was a mistake. On their part." "Boss?" Willie silenced Marcus with a look, then returned his attention to Dora. "Here's how this works, Ms. Buckner. You were found bleeding on my doorstep. That makes you mine until I say otherwise. You don't leave this room without my permission. You don't contact anyone without my approval. And you tell me everything you know about who did this to you." "I'm not your prisoner," Dora managed, though her voice came out weaker than she wanted. Willie's smile was cold and sharp. "No, you're under my protection. There's a difference." He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate precision. "Get some rest. We'll talk more when you're stronger, because whoever hurt you made this personal, and I always finish what someone else starts." He walked out, Marcus following with one last suspicious glance at Dora. The door closed, leaving her alone with silk sheets and unanswered questions, and the terrifying realization that she'd just become a pawn in a game much bigger and deadlier than she'd imagined. Dora waited until Dr. Russo's footsteps faded down the hallway before she swung her legs over the side of the bed. Pain shot through her ribs, white-hot and breathtaking, but she gritted her teeth and stood anyway. She wasn't staying here, wasn't becoming some mobster's pet project or liability or whatever Willie Johnson thought she was. The room spun once, violently, before settling. She grabbed the bedpost, steadied herself, and took inventory. Her clothes had been replaced with silk pajamas that probably cost more than her camera equipment. Her boots sat by the door. No phone, no wallet, no keys. Perfect. She made it 3 steps before her ribs screamed loud enough that she had to stop and breathe through the agony. By the time she reached the door, sweat beaded on her forehead, and her vision had started to blur at the edges. The hallway beyond was empty. Plush carpet, recessed lighting, oil paintings that belonged in museums. She turned left because it felt like the direction away from voices and started moving. She made it maybe 20 feet. "Going somewhere, Ms. Buckner?" Dora spun too fast and nearly collapsed. A man in a black suit materialized from a doorway she hadn't noticed, hand resting casually on the gun holstered at his hip. "I'm leaving," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "You can't keep me here." "Actually," a familiar voice said from behind her. "I can?" Willie Johnson emerged from the stairwell, still in his burgundy suit, but with his jacket off and sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked tired, annoyed, and not remotely surprised to find her trying to escape. "Back to bed," he said. "Now." "I'm not—" "You can barely stand." He closed the distance between them in 3 strides. "You've got cracked ribs, a concussion, and enough painkillers in your system that you shouldn't be vertical. So unless you want to collapse in my hallway and make Dr. Russo's night even longer, I suggest you listen. I don't take orders from criminals." His smile was sharp. "And yet here you are, in my club, under my roof. Alive because I decided you should be. So maybe, just this once, you make an exception." The guard was still watching, hand on his weapon. The hallway suddenly felt very small. "Why?" Dora demanded. "Why protect me? I was investigating you. I have documentation linking your club to councilman corruption I've been trying to root out for 6 months," Willie interrupted. "I know exactly what you have, Ms. Buckner, or had, before someone took it from you." That stopped her. "You knew I was investigating? I make it my business to know everything that happens in my territory, including idealistic journalists with telephoto lenses staking out my property." He gestured toward the bedroom. "Now move, before you pass out and I have to carry you. Again." Dr. Russo was not pleased. "Cracked ribs don't heal faster with stupidity," she said, rechecking Dora's vitals with sharp, efficient movements. "You're lucky you didn't puncture a lung." "I thought you said it missed major arteries," Dora muttered, wincing as the doctor pressed against her side. "I said you were lucky the beating didn't do more damage." Dr. Russo caught her eye, her expression grave. "Ms. Buckner, whoever attacked you knew exactly where to hit. This wasn't random violence. This was professional work designed to hurt you badly enough to scare you, but not badly enough to kill you. Yet." The last word hung in the air like a blade. Willie, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed, didn't flinch. "Hence why she stays here until we know who's responsible." "My camera," Dora said suddenly. "They took my camera. 3 months of documentation, photos, videos, everything I had on Hodges' campaign. I need it back." "Your camera is leverage now," Willie said, "which means whoever took it either doesn't understand what they have or they're planning to use it." "I need that evidence. I'll find it." Willie's voice carried the weight of a promise and a threat. "Marcus is already tracking down your attackers. When we locate them, we'll recover your property." As if summoned, Marcus Reed appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand and expression grim. "Boss, we got an ID on the crew." Willie straightened immediately. "And?" Marcus hesitated, glancing at Dora, then back to Willie. 3 men, all off-duty CPD, Vice Squad." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Cops," Willie said flatly. "Moonlighting," Marcus confirmed. "Working private security for—" He paused, and something dangerous flashed across his face. "Vincent Calder." Willie went very still. "Say that again." "Vince Calder, your former lieutenant. He hired them." Marcus pulled up something on his tablet. Surveillance footage from 2 blocks over shows them dropping her outside the club at 9:47 p.m. They drove off in a black Escalade registered to Calder's security firm. Dora watched Willie's expression transform from controlled calm to something cold and lethal. "Vince sent them." "Gets better," Marcus continued. "Calder's been working as head of security for Councilman Hodges' campaign for 8 months. Same timeline as Ms. Buckner's investigation." The pieces clicked together in Dora's mind. Calder found out I was investigating the money trail. He sent cops to stop me. "And dump you on my doorstep," Willie finished, his voice deadly quiet. "Not to scare you, to lure me out, to make me respond." Marcus nodded. "He wanted you exposed, wanted you to retaliate publicly so he could bring heat down on the operation. FBI's been sniffing around his new setup. He needs a bigger target to distract them." "So I was bait," Dora said, nausea rising in her throat. "He used me to get to you." Willie moved to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, but she could hear the fury beneath it. "Vince Calder worked for me for 7 years. I trusted him with my territory, my contacts, my business. When he left to go legitimate, he laughed, sharp and humorless. I should have known better." "He's dirty," Marcus said, "using his police connections to run protection for Hodge while laundering campaign funds through legitimate security contracts. Classic setup. And he's using your club's reputation to cover his tracks." "My club." Willie turned back, and Dora saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Betrayal. Raw and personal. "He's making it look like I'm the one running the councilman's laundering operation. Which is why Ms. Buckner's investigation kept leading back here," Marcus said. Dora's head was spinning, and not from the concussion. "Wait, you're saying Willie Johnson isn't laundering money for Hodges' campaign?" Willie's smile was razor-sharp. "Oh, I laundered money, Ms. Buckner, just not for corrupt politicians. I have standards." "You're a mobster with standards," she said incredulously. "I'm a businessman who operates outside legal boundaries," he corrected. "There's a difference. I don't work with men who betray their oaths. I don't protect child predators or abusers. And I sure as hell don't help politicians rob the constituents they're supposed to serve." He moved closer, and despite everything, the pain, the fear, the absolute insanity of her situation, Dora found herself believing him. "Vince Calder used you to come after me," Willie said. "He took your evidence, hurt you, and left you where I'd find you. That was his first mistake. His second was thinking I'd let it slide." "What are you going to do?" Dora asked. Willie's expression was colder than she'd ever seen. "I'm going to get your camera back. I'm going to prove Calder's running the operation. And then I'm going to make sure he understands what happens when you betray the Southside outfit." He walked toward the door, Marcus falling into step beside him. "Oh," Willie added, pausing in the doorway. "And Ms. Buckner?" "You're staying here until this is finished. Not as a prisoner, as an asset. Because if Vince Calder is willing to beat you half to death to cover his tracks, imagine what he'll do now that you're under my protection." The door closed, leaving Dora alone with Dr. Russo and the terrifying realization that she'd just become the center of a war between two criminals, and the evidence she'd spent 3 months gathering was the match that would ignite it. Dora couldn't sleep. The painkillers Dr. Russo had administered should have knocked her out for hours, but her mind refused to quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw masked faces and felt rope burning into her wrists. So when voices drifted through the ventilation system sometime after midnight, she found herself listening. 15,000 a month through the 4th precinct, Marcus was saying, his voice muffled but clear enough. Captain Torres has been on our payroll for 3 years. He confirmed Calder approached him 6 months ago, trying to flip the arrangement. Willie's response was too low to make out. I know you don't want to believe it, Marcus continued, but Vince didn't just leave the organization. He's been systematically stealing your contacts, your connections, your infrastructure. The councilman's campaign is just the front. He's building his own operation using everything you taught him. Ora sat up slowly, ignoring the protest from her ribs. The voices were coming from a vent near the floor. She slid out of bed, carefully this time, and moved closer. How deep does it go? Willie's voice, clearer now, tired, angry. Deep enough that half the cops who used to look the other way for us are now on his payroll instead. He's offering better rates, cleaner money, legitimate cover through Hodge's security contracts. And the city funds? Councilman Hodge has been siphoning money from infrastructure projects for 2 years. Parks, schools, road maintenance, all ghost budgets. The money flows through Calder's security firm, gets cleaned, and comes out as campaign contributions and private investments. There was a long pause. Then Willie, how much? Conservative estimate, $23 million. Dora's breath caught. $23 million. Stolen from schools and parks. And the neighborhoods that needed it most. Her investigation had barely scratched the surface. And Vince takes his cut, Willie said. Something dangerous creeping into his tone. While Hodge gets re-elected on promises to fix the infrastructure he's been gutting. Exactly. Ms. Buckner was getting close to proving the connection. That's why Calder shut her down. By using my reputation as cover. Willie's voice dropped to something lethal. Making it look like I'm the one corrupting city officials, while he bleeds Chicago dry. Dora's hands clenched. She'd spent 3 months following the money, documenting the connections, building her case. And the entire time, she'd been chasing the wrong villain. Or had she? The journalist, Marcus said carefully. What are you planning to do with her? Keep her alive, Willie replied, until we figure out Calder's endgame. She was investigating us, boss. Her documentation could prove we're not the ones running Hodge's operation, could show the city who's really stealing from them. A pause. Could be useful, if she's smart enough to see the bigger picture. And if she's not? The silence that followed made Dora's blood run cold. She stood abruptly, too abruptly, and her vision swam. She grabbed the wall, steadied herself, and made a decision that was probably stupid, but felt necessary. If they were going to discuss her fate, she deserved to be in the room. She found them in Willie's private office down the hall, door slightly ajar. Marcus saw her first, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon before Willie raised a hand to stop him. Ms. Buckner. Willie leaned back in his leather chair, whiskey glass in hand, looking utterly unsurprised by her appearance. Eavesdropping is dangerous in this line of work. So is beating journalists and dumping them on doorsteps, Dora shot back, moving into the room despite the pain radiating through her torso. But here we are. Marcus moved to intercept her, but Willie gestured him back. Let her speak. I heard everything, Dora said, meeting Willie's eyes. The payoffs, the police connections, the infrastructure theft. Then you understand the situation is more complicated than your investigation suggested. Complicated? Dora's voice rose. You just admitted to bribing police captains. You're running protection rackets. You are one of the people I was trying to expose. Willie set down his glass with deliberate precision. Marcus, give us the room. Boss, now. Marcus left, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded too much like a trap closing. Willie stood, moving around his desk with the fluid grace of a predator. "You want to expose corruption, Ms. Buckner? Let me show you what real corruption looks like." He pulled a file from his desk drawer, thick, bursting with documents, and dropped it on the surface between them. 2 years of financial records, city contracts awarded to shell companies, funds diverted from public projects into private accounts, police officers taking bribes not to look the other way for criminals, but to ignore crimes committed by the people running the city. Dora opened the file, her journalist instincts overriding her caution. Bank statements, wire transfers, names she recognized from city council meetings and campaign rallies. "Councilman Hodge has stolen $23 million from the neighborhoods that elected him," Willie continued. "He's gutted school programs, defunded community centers, let infrastructure crumble, all while promising reform and progress. And Vince Calder is helping him do it." "Why do you even have this?" Dora demanded. "Why document it if you're just going to let it continue?" Willie's smile was cold. "Because knowledge is currency, Ms. Buckner. And in my world, the person with the most information controls the board." "That's not an answer." "Then try this one. I don't work with men who steal from children and families. I don't protect politicians who betray their constituents. My organization operates outside the law, yes. But we have rules. Lines we don't cross." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "Richard Hodge and Vince Calder crossed every single one." Dora stared at the files, her worldview tilting on its axis. "So what? You're the honorable criminal? The gangster with a conscience?" "I'm the devil, you know," Willie said. "And right now, that makes me safer than the devil wearing a campaign smile and a badge." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that there was a difference between organized crime and public service, that Willie's empire was still built on violence and intimidation and fear. But standing in his office, looking at evidence of corruption that dwarfed anything she'd uncovered, she couldn't deny the truth. They had the same enemy. "Why show me this?" she asked quietly. "Because you're going to help me take them down," Willie said. "Your investigation was close, too close. That's why Calder moved against you." "But you were only seeing half the picture. And you'll show me the other half. In exchange for your cooperation, yes." Dora met his eyes, dark, calculating, but surprisingly honest. "What kind of cooperation?" "The kind where you stay alive long enough to publish the real story. Where Vince Calder and Richard Hodge face justice for what they've done. Where the city learns who's really been stealing from them. And your organization walks away clean." Willie's smile was sharp. "My organization was never your story, Ms. Buckner. Hodge was. Calder was. I'm just the man who's going to help you prove it." He was right, and she hated that he was right. "I need my camera back," she said finally. "All my documentation. Everything Calder took from me. You'll have it within 48 hours. And I want full access to your files on Hodge and Calder. No redactions, no selective editing." Willie considered this, then nodded. "Agreed, on one condition. Anything that exposes my legitimate business interests or puts my people at risk stays confidential." "Define legitimate. The restaurant, the club's entertainment license, property investments, things that keep this place running legally." Dora studied him, this man who'd somehow become her unlikely ally. "And the illegal parts?" "Use your judgment," Willie said. "You're a journalist. You know what serves the public interest And what's just sensationalism? It was more trust than she'd expected. More than she probably deserved, given that she'd spent 3 months trying to destroy him. "Okay," she said. "We have a deal." She found him on the balcony an hour later, unable to sleep, and drawn by the sound of rain against glass. Willie stood at the railing, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, staring out at the Chicago skyline. He didn't turn when she approached, but his posture shifted, acknowledging her presence without inviting it. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Concussion," Dora said, moving beside him, "and the existential crisis of realizing the mobster I was investigating is less corrupt than the politician I voted for." Willie's laugh was short and humorless. "Welcome to Chicago." Rain misted the air, cool and clean, washing away the smell of blood and fear that still clung to her memory. The city stretched out below them, lights glittering like scattered diamonds, beautiful and broken and hers. "Why did you really help me?" Dora asked quietly. "The truth." Willie was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because 15 years ago, someone found me bleeding in an alley after a deal went bad. They could have left me there. Should have, probably. Instead, they called for help, stayed until the ambulance came." He turned to look at her. "I remember thinking, as I was losing consciousness, that maybe the world wasn't entirely cruel, that maybe mercy still existed, even in the darkest corners." "What happened to them?" "They disappeared, never got their name, never got to say thank you." His eyes held hers. "When I found you on those steps, bleeding and afraid, I saw a chance to be that person for someone else, to prove that mercy still exists. Even in my world." The vulnerability in his voice was startling, real, in a way that made her chest tighten. "I'm not sure we're the heroes in this story," Dora said. Willie's smile was sad and knowing. "Heroes rarely are, Ms. Buckner. But maybe we can be the people who stop the real villains. That's something." Thunder rolled in the distance, rain fell harder, and for just a moment, standing on a balcony with Chicago's most dangerous man, Dora Buckner felt safer than she had in months, even if she knew it couldn't last. The deal was struck over coffee at dawn. "You get full access to my files on Hodge and Calder," Willie said, sliding a flash drive across the breakfast table. "Financial records, wire transfers, communications. Everything you need to prove they've been stealing from the city." Dora picked up the drive, turning it over in her fingers. "And in exchange? You work from here, under my protection. You don't publish until we've neutralized the immediate threat." His dark eyes held hers. "And when you do publish, my organization's involvement stays buried." "You want me to lie. I want you to focus on the truth that matters. Corrupt politicians stealing from the people who elected them. My business dealings are a separate story, one that doesn't serve the public interest right now." Dora's jaw tightened. Every journalistic instinct screamed that she was compromising her integrity. But the alternative was what? Going back to her apartment where Calder's men knew to find her? Publishing half a story that would get buried while the real criminals walked free? "I want my camera back," she said, "and my original documentation. Non-negotiable. Marcus is working on it. I want to interview your contacts, the people who can corroborate what's in these files." Willie considered this. "Selected contacts, with supervision. Some of these people won't talk to a journalist, even one under my protection. Then I want access to the money trail. I need to trace every dollar from city accounts to Calder's security firm to Hodges' campaign. You'll have it. Dora studied him across the table. This man who'd somehow shifted from target to ally in the span of 72 hours. Why does this matter to you? Really? You could eliminate Calder quietly, take back your territory, and move on. Why go through the trouble of exposing Hodge? Willie's expression hardened. Because Vince Calder didn't just betray me. He used my reputation to cover crimes against people who can't fight back. Every dollar Hodge steals is a teacher who doesn't get paid, a pothole that doesn't get filled, a community center that closes its doors. That blood is on Calder's hands, and now it's on mine by association. So this is about reputation. This is about the only thing I have left, Willie said quietly. My word. In my world, reputation is currency. If people think I'm stealing from schools and families, I'm no better than the politicians I refuse to work with. The conviction in his voice was startling. This wasn't about territory or profit or revenge, though those were certainly factors. This was about something more fundamental: identity. Who he was versus who people thought he was. Okay, Dora said finally. We have a deal. Willie extended his hand across the table. She took it, his grip firm and warm and surprisingly gentle. Welcome to the dark side, Ms. Buckner. The next week blurred into a rhythm that felt surreal. Days, Dora worked in Willie's private office, surrounded by ledgers and financial statements and testimony transcripts. Marcus had recovered her camera, cracked but functional, and the memory card was intact. Her original documentation combined with Willie's files painted a picture of corruption so vast it made her stomach turn. She traced money from city infrastructure budgets into shell companies with names like Metropolitan Security Solutions and Civic Enhancement Group. From there, funds flowed through Calder's Kipimir security firm, got laundered through legitimate business expenses, and emerged as campaign contributions to Hodges' re-election fund. $23 million over 2 years. Parks projects that were never completed. School renovations that never happened. Road repairs that existed only on paper. This is enough to put them away for decades, she told Willie on the 4th day, surrounded by printouts and sticky notes mapping the conspiracy. If you can prove it came from them and not me, Willie replied, leaning against the door frame with coffee in hand. Your financial records show money leaving your accounts, not entering them. You were paying protection fees to Captain Torres, yes, but you weren't receiving city funds. Torres was on Calder's payroll too. He'll claim I was the source. Not if we have testimony from the city comptroller. Dora pulled up a document on her laptop. Someone's been flagging these transactions for months. Whistleblower reports that went ignored. If we can find them, already found. Marcus entered with a thin woman in her 50s, nervous and pale. Ms. Buckner, meet Diane Chen, City Comptroller's office. She's been trying to report Hodges' theft for 8 months. Nights, Dora saw a different side of Willie's operation. She watched from the shadows as he met with contacts, some legitimate, some decidedly not. Watched him negotiate, threaten, charm, and strategize. He moved through Chicago's underworld like a conductor leading an orchestra, every gesture deliberate, every word calculated for maximum effect. But she also saw moments of unexpected gentleness. A conversation with one of his restaurant workers, asking about her daughter's college applications and quietly offering to cover tuition. A phone call to a community center in Englewood. donating funds anonymously to keep their after-school program running. A late-night visit to a hospital where one of his men lay recovering from a shooting, Willie sitting beside the bed until dawn, just present. "You're not what I expected," Dora admitted one evening, watching him review security footage in his office. Willie glanced up, one eyebrow raised. "Disappointed?" "Confused," she corrected. "You run a criminal organization. You bribe police, intimidate rivals, operate outside every legal boundary, but you also care about your people, about the neighborhoods you operate in. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." He returned his attention to the screens. "I break laws, Ms. Buckner. I don't break people. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." His voice was firm. "The law is a construct created by people with power to maintain their power. I operate in the spaces the law doesn't protect, the neighborhoods politicians ignore, the people the system fails. Do I profit from it? Absolutely. But I also employ 300 people, support 40 local businesses, and make sure the streets in my territory are safer than the ones the city's supposed to be protecting." It was a rationalization, Dora knew, a way to justify the unjustifiable. But standing in his office, reviewing evidence of politicians who'd sworn to serve the public while systematically robbing them, she couldn't quite dismiss his logic. Maybe morality wasn't as binary as she'd always believed. On the 7th night, Willie insisted she take a break. "You've been staring at spreadsheets for 18 hours, he said, appearing in the doorway with 2 plates of food. "Dr. Russo says you need rest and actual nutrition. I need to finish mapping the transaction chain. The chain will still be there in an hour." He set the plates on a small table by the window. "Come on, humor me." The food was from his restaurant downstairs. Perfectly seared salmon, roasted vegetables, risotto that tasted like heaven. They ate in comfortable silence, the Chicago skyline glittering beyond the window. "Can I ask you something?" Dora said finally. Willie nodded. "That night you found me. You could have called the police, could have left me at a hospital and walked away. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a long moment, his fork pausing mid-air. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Because when I looked at you, bleeding and afraid and still fighting, I saw someone worth protecting, someone who'd risked everything for truth and justice and got destroyed for it." He met her eyes. "And I thought, maybe if I could save you, it would prove I'm not entirely the monster everyone thinks I am." The vulnerability in his admission made her chest tighten. "You're not a monster," Dora said quietly. Willie's laugh was bitter. "Tell that to the 15 men I've had killed over the years. Tell that to the families I've destroyed, the lives I've ruined. You're also not the villain in this particular story." "No," he agreed. "But I'm not the hero either. Heroes don't make the choices I've made." Dora reached across the table, her hand covering his. The gesture was instinctive, unexpected, and his fingers tensed beneath hers before slowly relaxing. "Maybe," she said, "we're both just people trying to do the right thing in a world that makes it impossible to stay clean." Willie looked at their joined hands, then back at her face, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. "No one ever looks at me like I'm worth saving," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like I'm more than the reputation I've built. Like I'm human." "You are human," Dora said. "A complicated, morally gray, occasionally terrifying human. but human nonetheless. His fingers tightened around hers. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, dangerous, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wondering what it would feel like to jump. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Willie pulled away, checking the message. His expression shifted instantly, from vulnerable to lethal in the span of a heartbeat. "What is it?" Dora asked. "Marcus found Calder," Willie said, standing abruptly. "He's planning something. Moving money, relocating assets. We need to move now." "Now, Willie, we're not ready." He turned, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "Calder knows you're alive, knows you're here. If we don't strike first, he'll come for you again. And next time, I might not find you in time." The unspoken promise in his voice was clear. He would protect her, no matter the cost, even if it meant going to war. The call came at 3 a.m. Dora woke to shouting in the hallway. Marcus's voice, sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet of the club's upper floors. She grabbed Willie's jacket from the chair where he'd left it earlier and slipped into the corridor. Willie's office door stood open, light spilling out. Inside, Marcus paced like a caged animal, while Willie sat behind his desk, perfectly still, in a way that promised violence. "How long?" Willie's voice was ice. "At least 3 weeks, maybe longer." Marcus threw a tablet onto the desk. "Someone's been feeding Calder our movements, our transactions, our security protocols. He knew exactly when to hit the North Side warehouse, knew which route our shipment would take through the port." "Who? That's the problem. It could be anyone with access to our systems." Marcus dragged a hand over his face. "But the leak started right around the time—" His eyes cut to the doorway, to Dora. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You think it's me?" Dora said flatly. "You're a journalist who showed up investigating us," Marcus said, his voice hard. "Now suddenly we have a leak feeding information to the man who tried to kill you. That's convenient." "Convenient?" Dora's voice rose. "I was beaten unconscious and left for dead. Or that's what you want us to believe." Marcus moved closer, his hand resting on his weapon. "How do we know Calder didn't send you here, plant you inside our operation to gather evidence from the inside?" "That's insane, is it? You're a journalist with a vendetta against organized crime. Calder offers you the story of a lifetime. Take down Willie Johnson from the inside. You get your exposé, he gets our operations exposed, everyone wins." "Except I'd be dead," Dora shot back. "Or did you miss the part where his men cracked my ribs?" "A few bruises to sell the story," Marcus countered. "You wouldn't be the first person to take a beating for a Pulitzer." "Marcus," Willie's voice cut through the argument like a blade. "That's enough. Boss, we need to consider—" "I said enough." Willie stood, his presence commanding immediate silence. "Ms. Buckner has had access to our files for a week. If she were feeding information to Calder, he'd have moved against us already. The leak started before she arrived." Marcus's jaw tightened. "With respect, boss, you're not thinking clearly about this. She's under my protection," Willie interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Which means she's off limits. Find me the real mole, Marcus." "We're wasting time looking at the wrong person." The tension in the room was suffocating. Marcus held Willie's gaze for a long moment, then nodded curtly and left, brushing past Dora without a word. When the door closed, Willie turned to her. "Go back to bed." "You defended me," Dora said quietly. "I defended logic." But something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, brief but unmistakable. Marcus is right about one thing. The timing is suspicious. The words hit like a physical blow. You think I'm the leak. I think I've been in this business long enough to know that trust is earned, not given. Willie moved to the window, his back to her. And you haven't been here long enough to earn it yet. Dora felt something crack inside her chest, hurt and anger and bitter disappointment. I risked everything for this story. I was beaten, threatened, nearly killed, and you still think— I think, Willie said, turning to face her, that Vince Calder is smart enough to use any weakness against me, including an idealistic journalist who believes she's doing the right thing. Get out of my office, Ms. Buckner. She left before he could see the tears burning behind her eyes. For the next 2 days, Dora felt the weight of suspicion following her everywhere. Marcus assigned men to shadow her movements. They called it protection, but she knew surveillance when she saw it. Her computer access was restricted. Her phone calls were monitored. She was a prisoner in all but name. On the 3rd day, she caught one of Marcus's men following her to the bathroom. Seriously? She snapped, whirling to face him. The guard, young, barely 25, had the decency to look embarrassed. Orders, ma'am. Orders to watch me pee? Tell Marcus if he's that paranoid, he can install cameras himself. She stormed back to her room, fury propelling her forward. This was ridiculous. She'd given up everything to help them expose Calder and Hodge, and they were treating her like a criminal. Fine. If they wanted proof of her loyalty, she'd find it herself. The key was in the financial records. Dora had been mapping money trails for days, tracing transactions between Calder's security firm and various shell accounts. But now, she looked at the data differently, not tracking where money went, but who had access to know where it was going. Willie's operation was compartmentalized. Only a handful of people knew the full scope of his transactions. Marcus, obviously. Willie himself. And Dora pulled up the access logs on her laptop, cross-referencing them with the dates Marcus had identified as leak points. There. Every time information was leaked to Calder, one person had accessed the system within hours prior. Lena Russo, Willie's accountant. The woman who managed the club's finances, who knew every transaction, every shipment, every payment. Dora's hands shook as she dug deeper. Lena had worked for Willie for 8 years, since before Calder left the organization. Trusted, reliable, above suspicion. But Lena's maiden name, buried in employment records that Dora only found because she was looking, told a different story. Lena Calder, Vince Calder's sister. Dora found Marcus in the security office, reviewing surveillance footage. I need to show you something, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Marcus didn't look up. Unless it's a confession, I'm not interested. It's proof. Dora set her laptop on his desk, pulling up the evidence. Your mole is Lena Russo, Vince Calder's sister. That got his attention. Marcus studied the screen, his expression shifting from skepticism to fury as he processed what he was seeing. Christo, she's been here for 8 years, Dora confirmed, longer than anyone except you and Willie. She has access to everything. Why didn't this show up in background checks? Because she changed her name when she married, and she married specifically to hide the connection. Dora pulled up more documents. Her husband, Michael Russo, died 3 years ago. 6 months later, Vince left Willie's organization and started working for Hodge. The timeline fits. Marcus was already moving, grabbing his phone. We need to lock down the building. If Lena realizes, we know— She already knows. Dora pointed to a timestamp on the access log. She accessed the security system 20 minutes ago. Saw me pulling her records. Merda. Marcus was out the door before Dora could respond, shouting orders into his phone. They found Lena's office empty, her computer wiped, her safe cleaned out. But Willie found her at the service entrance, car packed, about to disappear into the night. "Going somewhere, Lena?" Willie's voice was soft, lethal. Dora watched from the doorway as Lena turned, her face pale but defiant. She was older than Dora had expected, mid-40s, elegant, with Vince's same sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes. "You were going to destroy him," Lena said, her voice steady despite the gun Marcus had trained on her. "My brother. You were going to bury him for leaving your organization." "I was going to let him go," Willie corrected, "until he started stealing my territory and using my reputation to cover his crimes." "He's building something better than this." Lena gestured at the club, contempt in her voice. "Something legitimate, legal. You couldn't stand that he didn't need you anymore." "He needed me enough to plant you here for 8 years, Willie said coldly. "Needed me enough to send his sister to spy on everything I built." "I protected this place," Lena's composure cracked. "I warned Vince when you were planning something reckless. I kept you from starting wars that would have gotten people killed. I saved your operation more times than you know, while feeding my intelligence to the man trying to destroy me." Willie moved closer, and Dora saw the rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. "Did you know about the journalist? About what he did to her?" Lena's eyes flicked to Dora, something like guilt flashing across her face. "That wasn't supposed to happen. Vince said he'd scare her off, make her back down. He had her beaten unconscious and dumped on my doorstep." Willie's voice was deadly quiet. "Was that part of the plan? Use her to lure me into a trap?" "The cops are coming," Lena said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Tomorrow. They have a warrant to raid Le Chateau. Vince has falsified evidence linking you to Hodge's money laundering. Photos, documents, testimony. When they search this place, they'll find everything they need to bury you." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus swore viciously. Willie went very still. "Kill her," Marcus said flatly. "She's a traitor. She doesn't get to walk away." Willie's hand moved to his weapon. "Wait." Dora stepped forward, her heart hammering. "Don't!" Willie turned, his eyes cold and empty. "She betrayed us. She's been feeding our enemies information for years. She deserves prison," Dora interrupted. "Not execution. If you kill her, you prove Calder right, that you're the monster he's painting you as." "I am the monster, Ms. Buckner. Then prove you're more than that." Dora held his gaze, refusing to back down. "You wanted to expose Calder and Hodge? To show the city who the real criminals are? You can't do that with blood on your hands. You have to be smarter than them." "Smart doesn't stop a police raid," Marcus said. "No," Dora agreed. "But the truth does." She turned to Lena. "You said they falsified evidence. We expose that. We leak the real story before they can execute the raid. Show the city exactly what Calder and Hodge have been doing, and how they're using falsified evidence to cover their tracks." As we continue, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's continue in the story. Willie studied her, something shifting behind his eyes. "You want me to go public. I want you to fight them the way they can't defend against, with the truth." Dora's voice was firm. "Let me publish everything. The money laundering, the theft, the falsified evidence, all of it. Once it's public, they can't bury you without exposing themselves." "They'll still raid the club," Marcus warned. "Let them," Dora said. They won't find anything because there's nothing to find. Willie isn't the one running Hodge's operation. The evidence will prove it. Willie looked at Lena, then at Marcus, then back to Dora. She could see him calculating, weighing violence against strategy, brutality against survival. Finally, he holstered his weapon. "Marcus, lock her up. We'll turn her over to the feds once this is finished." He turned to Dora. "You have 24 hours to publish your story. Make it count." As Marcus led Lena away, Willie caught Dora's arm, his grip gentle but firm. "You just saved her life," he said quietly. "And maybe mine, too." "I saved us both," Dora corrected. "Now let's finish this before Calder realizes we know he's coming." The abandoned train depot sat on the outskirts of Chicago like a corpse, hollow, gutted, forgotten by everyone except people who needed privacy for the kind of business that couldn't happen in daylight. Willie adjusted his cufflinks as Marcus pulled the car up to the entrance, the building's skeletal frame silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. "He'll bring backup," Marcus said, scanning the shadows. "This is a trap." "I know." Willie checked his weapon, loaded, safety off. "That's why you're staying in the car. If this goes wrong, you get Dora and Dr. Russo out of the city. Understood?" Marcus's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Willie stepped out into the cold October air, his breath misting. Somewhere in the darkness, Vince Calder was waiting. And one way or another, this ended tonight. Dora watched from the security office as Willie's car disappeared into the night, her stomach twisting with dread. "He's walking into a trap," she said to the empty room. Her story was written. 12,000 words of documentation, evidence, and testimony that would destroy Hodge's campaign and expose Calder's operation. It was scheduled to publish at dawn, sent to every major news outlet in Chicago. But none of that mattered if Willie didn't survive the next hour. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. The guard stationed outside moved to block her. "Ms. Buckner, boss said you stay inside." "The boss isn't here," Dora said, pushing past him, "and I'm not asking permission." She found Marcus's backup car in the garage, keys still in the ignition, GPS showing Willie's location blinking on the screen. She slid behind the wheel, started the engine, and drove into the darkness before anyone could stop her. The depot's interior was a cathedral of rust and shadows. Willie walked through the main hall, his footsteps echoing off exposed girders and crumbling concrete. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting everything in shades of gray. "Willie Johnson," Vince Calder's voice drifted from the darkness ahead. "Punctual as always." Willie stopped, his hand resting casually on his weapon. "Vince!" Calder stepped into the light, and Willie felt a cold satisfaction at seeing him. Same sharp features, same calculated smile, but something desperate lurking beneath the confidence. Vince had always been good at playing the angles, until the angles started playing him. "You wanted to talk," Willie said. "So talk." "I wanted to see if the rumors were true." Calder moved closer, hands visible, empty. "That the great Willie Johnson has gone soft. That you're letting a journalist with a bleeding heart dictate your business decisions." "Careful, Vince. You're sounding jealous." Calder laughed, sharp and bitter. "Jealous? Of what? Your dying empire? Your outdated code of honor?" He shook his head. "I'm building something better, legitimate. Protected by the very system you've spent your life fighting against." "You're stealing from schools and families," Willie said coldly. "Hiding behind campaign contributions and security contracts. That's not better. That's just cowardice with a legal veneer." "It's evolution," Calder corrected. The future of this business, and you're too stuck in the past to see it. The past where we didn't prey on the people we're supposed to protect? Protect? Calder's smile was vicious. You really have let that reporter tame you. The Willie Johnson I knew didn't care about protecting anyone except himself. The Willie Johnson you knew didn't have to clean up your messes. Willie's hand tightened on his weapon. You used my reputation to cover your crimes, made it look like I was the one corrupting Hodge. That stops tonight. No, Calder said softly. Tonight, you stop. He snapped his fingers. 4 men emerged from the shadows, weapons drawn, forming a loose circle around Willie. Dora parked 100 yards from the depot and approached on foot, her camera slung across her shoulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could see light flickering inside the building, flashlight beams cutting through darkness. Voices, muffled and tense. She moved closer, using rusted machinery as cover, until she reached a broken window that offered a clear view of the confrontation inside. Willie stood surrounded, outnumbered, but his posture remained relaxed, almost casual. Calder circled him like a predator, talking, gesturing, clearly enjoying the moment. Dora raised her camera. Whatever happened next, she'd document it. This is how it ends, Calder said, his voice echoing through the depot. The great Willie Johnson, brought down by his own sentimentality. When the cops find your body, they'll find evidence linking you to Hodge's money laundering. Case closed. Councilman Hodge gets re-elected, I take over your territory, and Chicago moves forward. With you stealing from it, Willie said. With me controlling it. Calder's smile widened. There's a difference. Yeah, Willie said softly. There is. His weapon was in his hand, out before anyone could react, firing twice, both shots hitting the men to his left. He dove behind a concrete pillar as the remaining gunmen opened fire, bullets ricocheting off metal and stone. Dora's breath caught. She should run, should get out before... Willie emerged from cover, taking down another shooter with lethal precision. But Calder had vanished into the shadows, and the 4th gunman was moving to flank Willie's position. Without thinking, Dora climbed through the window. "Behind you!" she screamed. Willie spun, some saw her, and his expression shifted from focused calm to absolute horror. "Dora, get out!" The distraction cost him. Calder appeared from the darkness, a pistol pressed against Willie's temple. "Drop it," Calder ordered, "or I paint the walls with your boss's brain." The remaining gunman had his weapon trained on Dora. She froze, camera still in her hands, heart thundering. Willie's eyes met hers across the distance. "I'm sorry," they said. "You should have stayed away." "You brought your pet journalist," Calder said, amused. "How touching. She can watch you die." "Then I'll finish what my men started," and Willie moved, fast, brutal, slamming his elbow into Calder's ribs and twisting away from the gun. The shot went wide, deafening in the enclosed space. The 4th gunman turned his weapon toward Willie. Dora didn't hesitate. She launched herself forward, crashing into Willie as the gun fired. Pain exploded across her upper arm, white-hot and devastating. But she'd changed the trajectory enough that the bullet grazed instead of killed. They hit the ground hard, Willie's body covering hers as more shots echoed through the depot. Then silence. Dora looked up, gasping, and saw Marcus standing in the doorway with 2 more of Willie's men, weapons drawn. The 4th gunman lay motionless on the floor. And Calder was on his knees, blood spreading across his chest. Willie's gun trained on his heart. "You shouldn't have touched her," Willie said, his voice empty of everything except cold finality. He fired once more. Calder crumpled. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Willie dropped beside Dora, his hands immediately pressing against the wound in her arm. "Why did you... Christo, why are you here? I told you to stay at the club. You were walking into a trap," Dora gasped, pain radiating through her entire arm. "I couldn't just..." "You could have been killed." His voice cracked, raw with emotion she'd never heard from him before. "Dora, you almost, but I wasn't." She caught his face with her good hand, forcing him to look at her. "I'm okay, we're okay. You took a bullet for me." "You've taken several metaphorical ones for me," she said, trying to smile through the pain. "It seemed fair. This isn't a joke." "I know." Her voice softened. "I know, Willie. But I couldn't stay away. I couldn't let you face this alone." His forehead pressed against hers, his breath ragged. "You're insane. Reckless. Completely." "In love with you," she whispered. The words hung between them, fragile and true and terrifying. Willie pulled back just enough to see her face, his dark eyes searching hers. "Dora!" "Boss, we need to move," Marcus called urgently. "CPD is 3 minutes out." Willie lifted her carefully, cradling her against his chest as he stood. "Marcus, get us out of here. Now!" As they ran toward the waiting car, Dora caught one last glimpse of the depot, of Vince Calder's body, of the evidence of violence that would finally prove who the real criminal was. Her story would be published in 2 hours. The truth would come out. Justice, messy and imperfect, and stained with blood, would be served. But in Willie's arms, feeling his heart hammering against her cheek, Dora realized the most important truth of all. Sometimes salvation didn't come from staying safe. Sometimes it came from diving into the fire for the person you couldn't bear to lose, even if that person was the devil himself. The story broke at dawn. City officials' campaign funded by stolen infrastructure money. Off-duty police involved in cover-up. By Dora Buckner. Dora watched from her hospital bed as her phone exploded with notifications, retweets, shares, news outlets picking up the story. The photos she'd taken at the depot, combined with 8 months of documentation, painted an irrefutable picture. Councilman Richard Hodge and his security chief Vincent Calder had systematically stolen $23 million from Chicago's most vulnerable neighborhoods. The evidence was devastating. Bank records, wire transfers, testimony from Diane Chen, the city comptroller who'd been silenced for months, and photographs, grainy but clear, of the confrontation at the depot, of Calder's men opening fire, of the violence that had been used to protect the conspiracy. Willie Johnson's name appeared nowhere in the article. "You protected him," Marcus said from the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Dora looked up from her phone, her bandaged arm throbbing despite the painkillers. "I told the truth. The truth is that Calder and Hodge were the ones stealing from the city." Willie's organization was tangential to the real story. "Tangential," Marcus repeated, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "That's one word for it." "He saved my life," Dora said quietly, "multiple times. The least I could do was not destroy his in return." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "He's been asking about you, every day since the depot. Drove Dr. Russo crazy checking if you'd been transferred here safely." Dora's chest tightened. "Where is he?" "Cleaning house," Marcus said. "Making sure nothing in your story comes back to bite us. Boss's orders. Anyone who can connect us to Hodge's operation disappears. Permanently." The words sent a chill through her. "Marcus, relax. Disappears from Chicago, not from existence. Relocated. New identities. New lives far away from the fallout." He moved to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Ms. Buckner, you changed him. Made him think about legacy instead of just survival. Not many people can do that." He left before she could respond. The city imploded over the next 3 weeks. Councilman Hodge resigned in disgrace. His campaign manager dead. His financial records seized by federal investigators. The police officers who'd moonlighted for Calder were arrested. Corruption charges, assault, conspiracy to commit murder. Captain Torres turned state's evidence to save himself, providing testimony that connected dozens of officials to the money laundering scheme. Chicago's newspapers ran stories for days. City Hall, corruption exposed. Millions stolen from schools. Journalists' investigation brings down councilmen. Dora gave interviews from her hospital bed, careful to focus on Hodge and Calder, while deflecting questions about how she'd gotten the evidence. "Sources within the investigation," she said repeatedly. "People who wanted the truth to come out." No one pressed too hard. The story was too good, the evidence too solid. And Dora Buckner, the freelance journalist who'd nearly died chasing corruption, became the hero Chicago didn't know it needed. She was nominated for a Pulitzer by the end of the month. They released her from the hospital on a Tuesday. Dora stood outside in the October sunshine, her arm still in a sling, breathing in the crisp autumn air. Her apartment had been compromised. Calder's men had ransacked it looking for evidence, so her belongings were in storage and she was technically homeless. A car pulled up to the curb. Black, expensive. The window rolled down to reveal Marcus behind the wheel. "Boss wants to see you," he said. Dora's heart kicked against her ribs. "Now? Now?" She got in. Le Chateau looked different in daylight. Less mysterious, more refined. The lunch crowd filled the main restaurant. Business professionals and tourists enjoying Italian cuisine, completely unaware of what the building's upper floors concealed. Marcus led her through the kitchen, up the private stairs, to Willie's office. He sat at his desk, reviewing documents, looking tired in a way she'd never seen before. His burgundy suit had been replaced with simple black, and there were shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Mr. Buckner," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Your arm?" "Healing. Dr. Russo says I'll have full mobility back in 6 weeks." "Good." He set down his pen, his dark eyes holding hers. "I read your story, all 12,000 words of it." "And?" "And you're a remarkable journalist." He stood, moving around the desk. "You exposed corruption, brought down a conspiracy, and did it without compromising your integrity. Chicago owes you a debt." "But," Dora prompted, hearing the unspoken word. Willie's smile was sad. "But you used my world to save yours. My connections, my files, my protection, all to build a story that makes you the hero while I remain the monster in the shadows." The accusation stung because it was partially true. "I protected your identity," Dora said. "Kept your organization out of the narrative. That was the deal." "I know, and you kept your word." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight of everything they'd survived. But the truth is, you got what you needed from me. Your career is made. Your story will win awards. And I'm still exactly what I was before, a criminal operating in the dark. That's not fair. It's completely fair, Willie interrupted gently. You did exactly what I would have done in your position. You survived. You won. I'm not angry. Dora, I'm just aware of how this was always going to end. Silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. I dismantled half my operation, Willie continued, returning to the window. The dirty cops on payroll, the protection rackets that relied on violence, the businesses that existed solely to launder money. Marcus thinks I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. Why, Dora asked quietly. Because you were right. He turned, his expression raw. About legacy. About who I want to be versus who I've been. You looked at me like I was worth saving. And his voice caught. I wanted to be the man you saw, even if I can never fully be him. Dora's throat tightened. Willie, you should go, he said, not unkindly. You have a career to build, awards to accept, a life to live outside of this darkness. And what if I don't want to go? The question hung in the air, dangerous and true. Willie studied her, something painful flickering in his eyes. Then you'd be making a mistake. Because I can clean the house all I want, but I'll never be legitimate. Never be someone you can introduce to colleagues or family. Never be anything except what I am. Which is? A man who loves you enough to let you walk away. The confession hit like a physical blow. Dora crossed the distance between them, her good hand catching his. You used my world to find your soul, she said, echoing his earlier words. Don't you see? We saved each other. Dora, I'm not asking for forever, she interrupted. I'm not asking for something impossible. I'm just asking for this moment, for the truth between us, without the darkness or the danger or the complications. Willie's hand tightened around hers. And what is the truth? That I love you, Dora said simply. Despite everything, logic says I shouldn't. Despite the fact that you're a criminal and I'm a journalist, this will never be simple. I love you anyway. For a long moment, Willie just looked at her. This woman who'd turned his world upside down, who'd made him question everything he'd built, who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd constructed. Then he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm on her skin. I love you too, he whispered. Enough to tell you to leave. Enough to let you go, if that's what's best for you. And if I say staying is what's best for me, then I'd say you're as insane as I am. His smile was sad and genuine. And I'd be grateful for every moment you chose to stay. They stood there in the afternoon light, two people from different worlds, holding on to something fragile and precious, and probably doomed. But for now, for this moment, it was enough. Outside, Chicago moved on, the scandal fading into memory, the city healing from wounds it hadn't known it had. And inside Le Chateau, in the office of the man the world would always see as a criminal, Dora Buckner found something she'd never expected. 1 year later. The Chicago Theater marquee glowed against the October evening. World premiere, Shadows in the System, a documentary by Dora Buckner. Inside, the theater was packed. Journalists, city officials, activists, academics, everyone who'd followed the Hodge scandal wanted to see the definitive account of corruption exposed. Dora stood backstage, her palms sweating despite the cool air, watching the crowd file in through a gap in the curtain. Her documentary had taken 8 months to complete. Interviews with victims of the stolen infrastructure funds, footage of abandoned parks and crumbling schools, testimony from Diane Chen, the comptroller who'd risked everything to be a whistleblower. And woven throughout, the story of one journalist's investigation that had nearly cost her life. Willie Johnson's name appeared nowhere in the film. "5 minutes, Ms. Buckner," the stage manager called. Dora took a breath, smoothed her black dress, and tried to quiet the part of her that was scanning the audience for a face she knew wouldn't be there. They hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since she'd made the decision to focus on her career, to accept the documentary deal, to step back from the impossible relationship that had consumed her for too long. It was the right choice, the smart choice. It still felt like losing a piece of her soul. The lights dimmed. The crowd quieted. And as Dora walked onto the stage to introduce her film, she told herself not to look for him in the darkness. She looked anyway. Willie Johnson sat in the back row, collar turned up, baseball cap pulled low, completely anonymous among the crowd. He'd known coming was a mistake. Knew seeing her again would reopen wounds that had barely scabbed over. But when Marcus had shown him the premiere invitation, he couldn't stay away. On screen, Dora's documentary unfolded with devastating precision. The corruption, the theft, the violence used to protect the conspiracy, all of it laid bare for Chicago to see. She'd won a Pulitzer for the original article. This film would win her an Oscar, and through it all, she'd kept her promise. His name never appeared. His organization remained in the shadows where it belonged. "You really did love her," Marcus whispered beside him. "Enough to let her tell the story without you in it." Willie didn't respond. Couldn't, really, because watching Dora on screen, passionate, brilliant, alive, he felt the same thing he'd felt a year ago when she'd first stumbled into his world. She was worth protecting, even from himself. When the film ended, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Dora returned to the stage, tears streaming down her face, accepting praise that she'd earned through blood and courage and relentless determination. Willie slipped out before the lights came up. Dora shook hands, accepted congratulations, and smiled until her face hurt. The after-party was at a gallery downtown. Champagne and catered food and conversations with people who wanted to talk about her brave journalism without understanding what it had actually cost. She stayed for an hour before exhaustion won. Her publicist called a car, and she escaped into the October night, grateful for the silence. The driver dropped her at her apartment building in Lincoln Park. A nice place, a safe place, the kind of home she'd always dreamed of having. She climbed out, pulling her coat tighter against the autumn chill, and headed for the entrance. Then she saw it. A single white rose on her windshield, pristine against the dark glass. Dora's heart stopped. She looked around. The street was empty, shadows pooling between streetlights, but she knew he was gone. He'd never risk being seen. She picked up the rose with shaking hands, and a small card fell free. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, precise, unmistakably his. "You once asked if villains can love. Now you know. W.J." Dora pressed the rose to her chest, tears burning behind her eyes. A year of distance, of trying to move on, of convincing herself that loving him was impossible. And he'd undone it all with 8 words. She looked up at the Chicago skyline, at the lights glittering in the darkness, and wondered if somewhere out there he was looking back. Willie stood on the penthouse balcony of his private residence overlooking the river, whiskey untouched in his hand, watching the city breathe. Le chateau was thriving. His legitimate businesses were expanding. The violent parts of his empire had been dismantled, replaced with operations that relied on strategy instead of bloodshed. Marcus still thought he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But when he thought of Dora, her face on that screen, her voice narrating truth with such conviction, he didn't regret the changes. She'd made him want to be better. And even though she'd chosen her world over his, even though they could never have the life he'd briefly imagined, she'd given him something invaluable: hope that monsters could change. That redemption, however incomplete, was possible. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the rose, and for everything else you'll never let me thank you for." D. Willie smiled, sad, genuine, and typed back, "You were always worth saving. Be brilliant. Be safe. Be everything you were meant to be." He deleted her number immediately after sending it. Clean breaks were the only kind that lasted. In the distance, lightning flickered. Rain was coming. He could smell it on the wind, taste it in the air. The same rain that had been falling the night he'd found her bleeding on his doorstep. The night that had changed everything. "Boss?" Marcus appeared in the doorway. "The North Side situation. We need your call." Willie took one last look at the skyline, at Dora's world, bright and hopeful and impossibly far from his, then turned back to the darkness he'd chosen. "Handle it quietly," he said. "No violence unless absolutely necessary. We're better than that now." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but nodded. As Willie walked inside, leaving the balcony and the rain and the ghost of what might have been, he carried one truth with him. Love didn't always mean staying. Sometimes it meant letting go. Giving someone the freedom to shine without your shadow dimming their light. And if that light occasionally reached back into the darkness, leaving white roses and whispered thanks, well, that was enough. It had to be. The world would remember Dora Buckner as the journalist who exposed a city's corruption, who risked everything for truth, who won every award her profession could offer. She would remember herself as the woman a mafia boss had found beaten and bound on a rainy pathway, and the moment that had changed them both. Willie Johnson never sought redemption. But when he thought of her, he made different choices. Choose strategy over violence. Choose a building over destroying. Chose to be slightly less of the monster the world believed him to be. Because somewhere out there, the woman who'd risked her life for truth was still telling stories. And one of them, the one she'd never write, was his. Sometimes salvation doesn't arrive in light. Sometimes it steps out of the shadows, kneels beside you, and whispers, "Who did this to you?" And from that question, everything else begins. The rain started falling over Chicago, washing the streets clean, carrying away the sins of yesterday, while tomorrow waited, uncertain and hopeful and impossibly complicated, just like love, just like them. In memory of every person who found salvation in unexpected places, and every love story too complicated for happy endings, but too real to be called tragedy. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comment below. If you love this story of survival, protection, and unexpected love, subscribe to our channel for more dark romance tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support helps us create more content like this. Thank you for being part of our community.